My handwriting's even worse. I can't even read what I wrote. I'm left-handed, so this is not going to be as warm and fuzzy as all of you guys. But it's more of an abstract representation of how I guess I think about him and how I remember him. All right, so it goes like this. I apologize if it's too technical. I don't mean it to be too technical. So, one of the most fascinating structures that, if you're studying a dynamic in general, is that of the social structure. And a social structure is mainly comprised of a social chain, and this social chain, like a probability chain, the participants, each participant gets a label, and in order to understand the chain as a whole, we understand each person understands his status relative to the next person, and that defines where you are in the chain. And that's similar to a social environment, or like an animal, like a chimp colony, where each person understands where he is relative to his position, relative to where he sits next or towards the other person. In chaotic environments, or the definition of a chaotic environment is an environment where the social chain is disrupted and you can't really tell where you are relative to the next person. You know who you are, but you don't know who you are relative to the person standing next to you. So by definition, that's a chaotic chain. And when we think about a chaotic chain, we can think about a stabilizing force. And a stabilizing force is defined as an element that this element doesn't really have an identity, or more specifically, this element can morph into any one of the other chains. So that gives it becomes like an identity element, and this identity element makes it so that each person thinks that he's sitting next to the previous element, so that he sees his friend in the other one. And this element that can morph into any element is called a morpher, or a morphism. And in life, in reality, in a social chain, the way this happens, or what happens, is that you can think of a person who thinks about, or who knows each person and knows what to say to that specific person. So when we try to remember somebody, if you think about how you remember Grandpa or what you remember of him, every person that you would speak to has a different memory, and you think that it's a completely different person. I don't remember him. If I were to recount what I see of him, what I remember of him, you wouldn't have the same memory, and you wouldn't have the same memory. And I think that comes from his ability to know each person's situation, to react to that individual. And in a way, he was a stabilizing force because he showed you where you stood relative to a more complex environment. And he really, understood you, and he understood, who you were. And I always remember him saying things to me, and I was like, how did you know that that's how I was? I mean, he was a trained therapist, so I guess years of practicing medicine, you get to pick up these things. But more importantly, I think that what you can remember from him is that going into something like that, a person who knows how to relate to each person as he is, it takes a lot of skill. It takes a lot of not just skill, but it takes a lot of attributes that person might have. Caring and understanding of people. And I really, when I remember Grandpa, that's what I remember about him. I remember what I admire about him particularly are all those skills that went into sort of understanding each person's own situation and adapting to it.